Sure, there's superficial, divided the waters, but we find that in almost every society and culture. That's not a parallel as much as it's just a generality. I would say what we see within the biblical account is that God purposefully creates. There's only one God. He purposefully creates, and then he creates, and it's good. And it continues to say it's good 7 times, and then at the end of chapter 1, just for
What I love that Wes is doing here is, and I want to pull this up in my archive, is he is talking about how Genesis, against the Enuma Elish and the different texts at the time of the creation stories that we have throughout the ancient Near East, is he's talking about how Genesis is a polemic, and I love it. It's so rare that I actually see someone get to have the opportunity to talk about this because it's such a buried topic. But the context of Genesis has been something, as you can see here, of major concern of my academic career. So I spent 10 years studying Genesis, and showing how it's a polemic. And I have this article here that Wes doesn't reference my article by any means, but we reference the same points. And I was so excited to hear it because it's just rare. It's a very buried topic. People don't talk about the fact that, like, what is the actual, it's a very basic question in hermeneutics, but I think people skip over it in Genesis. What was the intent to the original audience is a exegetical and hermeneutical question. And you find that God creates, as let's say, the doxology worship order. He creates these things that are directly opposed to the other parallel pagan accounts of the time of pre-medieval history. Genesis turns those pagan accounts backward and shows their error by stating the right, correct, and actual attributes of our created world. So instead of Tiamat and Enuma Elish, dying and then all the created gods become us, they become the earth, they become all this other stuff. Adonai enters the conversation and says, no, that's false. I created everything, and through my word and wisdom, I created everything. It's a brilliant thing, and it's such an in-depth topic, but it's a wonderful thing. And Wes
the
continues
thick
here.
people in the original audience. It says, and then it was very good. And then he creates humanity, not kings, but simply the humans that he creates in God's image. And they have purpose and meaning. And that.
See, that's the other thing. In the ancient Near East creation stories, most of the time, either you had the gods create humans for their own purpose, meaning the gods' purpose, usually to destroy and usually very evil things, or humans are a byproduct of some war or catastrophic event that happened and are not created with any purpose, no image. And again, Adonai flips that on its head and says, no, humans are made in my image with a divine purpose, and that is the arc and the biblical arc that we get throughout all of Scripture.
Instills them with this creation order. And that's not what we find in the Enuma Elish. In fact, we
Exactly. It's wonderful that he states this so concisely and so clearly.
Find the opposite in the Enuma Elish, is that the created order is not good, it's a mistake, and that you are not created in the image of God. And there's
So Carson here was actually trying to state that the Enuma Elish, or I'm sorry, that Genesis stole from the Enuma Elish on the basis of like common language, which Carson doesn't understand. In the ancient Near East, they had limited language, limited words, which is why Hebrew doesn't have words for like cousin and all this other stuff. Hebrew didn't have consonants for a very long time. You don't have these, you don't have a wide array of linguistic choices. And when something's being depicted and told orally, it usually gets told orally in one way. And so Carson runs with that and says, oh, see, Genesis copied from the Enuma Elish. And what Wes is doing a fantastic job here of reminding him of, like, no, it's a polemic against the Enuma Elish. So if it took anything from the Enuma Elish, it's doing so in a polemic manner, meaning like, hey, I'm going to use this phrase that the Enuma Elish uses and show you what actually happened, or correct you, or argue against it.
There's a reminder that regular people are not created in the image of God. So linguistically, I mean, Hebrew does have Semitic ties with Akkadian, doesn't with Sumerian. Sumerian is a language isolate, a glutenizing language. But I would say, just with all due respect, the parallels linguistically are not there. There might be superficial kind of concepts that are there,
which is what I just talked about. And again, Wes articulates it in such a brilliant way.
but they're so superficial that we can find them in everything. In the sense of, I'm in my office studio, you're in your office studio. That doesn't mean that that we're the same people or we're even in the same place. Does
Or that one is copying from the other just because you have a studio and lights. It does. They are colored the same though.
that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't agree with that. I just see if I have all these texts out, there's a lot of different information that you can see.
Let's not forget that, and now I'm running with the polemic thing because it's so fascinating. You know, you have Israel, you have the Hebrews captive in Egypt, and God uses every single plague kills one of the Egyptian gods, right? And I have a whole article on that, breaking that down. God literally makes fun and makes little of these ancient Near East pagan gods. He makes little of them. So it's not out of the realm that Genesis is utilizing language. And I'm just bending towards Carson. Like, I'm trying to be favorable towards Carson, right? And his argument. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that that Genesis account steals specific language from the New Middle East in order to belittle it, because that is what God repeatedly does: kills, makes polemic of, argues against, corrects, and in some ways makes fun of other pagan gods. It's not always a serious topic.
Yes, a lot of it's been copied word for word into the biblical text.
But what's the word for word?
In your version of
Yeah.
what you believe in, you keep saying that God's a he.
So now they skip into this whole other topic, which I'm not going to get into tonight. But I wanted to mention that because I think it's a brilliant thing that Wes does. Really, he articulates it very well, and he is able to handle these nuanced topics and relay very difficult information at a very common language level. So I wanted to point that out. I know my other video is kind of, I feel like I pointed out that I'm not bashing Wes at all, but he glides over certain historical points within the early church. But I think he does a fantastic job here.